The AMC Pacer looked like it had rolled in from a future nobody voted for. A compact car with massive glass, a rounded body, wide track stance, and proportions that made every parking lot feel like a display case. If you want to see how strange risks like this reshape Detroit, subscribe to Forgotten Detroit. In the years since, the Pacer became an easy punchline. The oddball bubble car people point at and laugh. But inside AMC, this was not a joke. It was a gamble from a small company trying to survive against giants. So was the Pacer truly a bad car, or a brave idea America was not ready to understand? By the early 1970s, American Motors Corporation was still technically a major automaker, but only in the most unforgiving sense. It stood in the same arena as General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, without anything close to their money, dealer strength, or production scale. That mattered because cars are brutally expensive before the first customer ever sees one. A new body, new tooling, crash testing, emissions work, factory changes, advertising, and dealer support could consume enormous sums. General Motors could bury those costs across millions of vehicles. AMC had to recover them from a much smaller sales base, so copying the big three was not a safe path. If AMC built a normal compact sedan that looked and felt like everyone else's, it still had to spend real development money, but it would be fighting companies that could outspend it, outproduce it, and undercut it when necessary. In a conventional battle, AMC was almost designed to lose. The market was also shifting under everyone's feet. Safety was becoming a bigger public concern. Federal rules were getting tougher. Buyers were paying more attention to fuel economy, especially as the decade moved toward energy anxiety. Smaller cars no longer seemed like odd little compromises. They were starting to look practical. AMC had experience here. The Rambler had once proved that a smaller American car could find a real audience. But by the 70s, that lesson was not enough. The company needed more than a sensible compact with good mileage. Sensible could be ignored. What AMC needed was attention. It needed a car that could make shoppers stop, magazines write, and competitors react. Not because weirdness was the goal, but because invisibility was fatal. That is the box the Pacer was born inside. AMC was not simply trying to build a small car. It was trying to create a reason to still exist. Inside AMC, the idea that became the Pacer started taking shape in 1971, under design chief Richard Dick Teague. The project was often known internally as Project Amigo, and from the beginning, it was not treated like a normal compact car program. The target was almost a contradiction. A car that took up less space on the road, but did not feel cheap, cramped, or punishing once you sat inside. AMC wanted big car room and comfort in a shorter package, something easier to park and more efficient to own, without asking Americans to accept the usual small car penalty. That is why the Pacer became wide, very wide. AMC would later market it as the first wide small car, which sounds like a slogan written after the fact, but it captured the core engineering choice. Instead of making a narrow little economy box, AMC pushed the passenger compartment outward, giving the car a broad stance and an unusually open cabin. This was also why the glass area became so important. The Pacer was designed to feel airy, modern, and almost panoramic from the driver's seat. Visibility was not just styling. It was part of the promise that a compact car could feel less confining. Teague's team also had to think about a future that seemed to be closing in fast. Safety regulations were becoming tougher. Fuel economy mattered more. Cities were getting more crowded. Buyers still wanted comfort, but the old formula of longer, heavier, and more powerful was starting to look vulnerable. So Project Amigo was AMC's attempt to jump ahead of that curve. The Pacer was meant to be compact, safer, roomier, and instantly recognizable, all at once. It was not designed to disappear into traffic. Before the jokes, before the reputation, before the car became an easy punchline, the concept was genuinely ambitious. AMC looked at where the market might be going and tried to build the answer early. The risk was that America might not want the future in quite that shape. The production Pacer made that idea impossible to miss. Parked next to other compacts of the mid-1970s, it looked as if someone had taken a small car and inflated it sideways. Its length was in compact territory, but its width was close to full-size American cars of the period. That gave the Pacer its strange planted stance, short from nose to tail, broad across the shoulders, with the wheels pushed out near the corners. From some angles, it looked stubby. From others, it looked almost impossibly wide for its class. Then there was the glass. The windshield wrapped around deeply. The side windows were huge. The rear glass curved around the back like a display case. AMC was trying to make the cabin feel open and easy to see out of, but the result gave the car its most famous nickname, the aquarium on wheels. That was not just a joke about styling. Compared with the narrow pillars and smaller window openings on many older cars, the Pacer gave passengers a panoramic view of traffic, sidewalks, and everything passing by. It felt less like sitting inside a compact car and more like being placed in a rolling observation bubble. The body shape added to that effect. The Pacer had rounded edges, a soft nose, and a high, blunt rear end. Long before jelly bean styling became common in the 1980s, AMC had already put a smooth, bulbous little capsule into showrooms. It was futuristic, but not in a sharp or glamorous way. It was futuristic in the way a household appliance could be futuristic. One of its strangest details was hiding in plain sight. The doors were not the same size. The passenger side door was longer than the driver's side door because AMC expected rear seat passengers to enter from the curb. A wider opening on the sidewalk side made it easier to climb into the back without stepping into traffic. And those doors were huge for a car this short. Watch one close and the scale makes sense immediately. That oversized door, the glassy cabin, and the wide body all came from practical decisions. But together, they created a car that looked unlike anything else on American roads. What buyers saw in the showroom was only half the story. The Pacer looked like a clean sheet experiment, but its engineering plan had already been rewritten before the first customer ever touched the door handle. Early in development, AMC was not simply imagining a weirdly shaped compact with big windows. The company was studying a more radical package, with ideas tied to front-wheel drive and a compact rotary engine from General Motors. That mattered, because a rotary engine was small for its output. In theory, it could help AMC build a short, roomy car with less mechanical bulk, stealing space from the cabin. The Pacer's wide body made more sense in that original plan. AMC wanted a small car that felt open inside, not cramped like many economy models. If the engine and drivetrain could be packaged tightly, the car could deliver unusual interior room without becoming a conventional sedan. Then the future changed. In 1974, General Motors abandoned its rotary engine program. The reasons were exactly the wrong ones for the moment: fuel economy and emissions. The oil crisis had changed what Americans expected from small cars, and new pollution rules made the rotary harder to justify. For AMC, that decision removed a major piece of the Pacer's intended layout. AMC did not have the money or time to start over with a completely new drivetrain. So the company turned to hardware it already knew, its rear-wheel drive straight-six engine and related components. This saved the program, but it also changed the character of the car. The straight-six was durable, familiar, and relatively inexpensive to use. It was also long and heavy. Instead of the compact powertrain the Pacer had been shaped around, AMC now had to fit a traditional engine up front, with a drive shaft running to the rear wheels. That meant a transmission tunnel through the floor, more weight, and packaging compromises inside a car that had been advertised by its very shape as something new. The irony was brutal. The Pacer still looked advanced from the outside, with its glass bubble cabin and rounded profile. Underneath, it was becoming more conventional than the original concept promised, and because the fallback drivetrain carried extra mass and was not especially efficient, the car entered a fuel-conscious market with one of its biggest advantages already weakened. When the Pacer finally reached showrooms for 1975, it did exactly what AMC needed it to do. It made people stop and look. This was not another compact trying to disappear in traffic. It was short, wide, rounded, and covered in glass. Magazine writers called attention to the shape immediately. Shoppers who had never cared about AMC suddenly had a reason to walk into an AMC dealership. Even people who disliked it usually wanted to see it up close because the Pacer looked less like a normal small car and more like a rolling concept car that had somehow made it onto the street. AMC leaned into that reaction. The company did not sell the Pacer as a bare-bones economy box. It promoted comfort, visibility, and space. Ads presented it as the first wide small car, a compact that did not punish passengers with a narrow cabin. The giant windows became a feature, not a punchline. Drivers were promised an open view of the road, easier parking, and a cabin that felt larger than the car's footprint suggested. And at first, the public response gave AMC a real reason to hope. Early demand was not imaginary. Exact first-year sales figures vary depending on the source and how they count model year production. But the larger point is clear. The Pacer launched with genuine momentum. Dealers had curiosity working in their favor. Reviewers were talking about it. Buyers were at least willing to consider the idea that AMC had built something clever instead of merely strange. For a company that could not outspend Detroit's giants, that attention mattered. The Pacer gave AMC headlines, showroom traffic, and an identity that no Chevrolet or Ford could copy overnight. But attention is not the same as acceptance. The glass, the width, the shape, and the promise of comfort had made the Pacer famous. Soon, those same traits would start turning into liabilities. The Pacer's biggest problem was that its design had no quiet mode. In 1975, the rounded body, huge glass area, and extra-wide stance made it feel futuristic. But once the first wave of curiosity passed, those same features became easy targets. The car looked friendly from one angle, bulbous from another, and cartoonish if the viewer had already decided not to take it seriously. A conventional compact could age into the background. The Pacer could not. It was always on display. That mattered because the practical case was getting harder to defend. Buyers saw a short car and expected small car fuel economy. What they got was a compact with a lot of weight, a wide body, and a six-cylinder engine doing the work. The Pacer was not disastrously thirsty compared with every American car of the period, but it was disappointing for something that looked like it should be an answer to the fuel crisis. And in the mid-1970s, disappointment carried a new cost. Gasoline prices, emissions rules, and economic pressure had changed what people tolerated. A strange car could be forgiven if it saved money at the pump. A heavy car could be forgiven if it felt powerful. The Pacer sat awkwardly between those expectations. Its acceleration was modest, its economy was not exceptional, and its unusual shape made every compromise more visible. AMC tried to widen the appeal, including offering a V8 later in the run. On paper, that gave buyers more power. In practice, it made the Pacer's identity even harder to explain. Was this supposed to be a sensible compact for a fuel-conscious decade, or a comfortable small cruiser with a bigger engine? The answer shifted depending on the brochure, but the market was moving faster than AMC could reposition the car. Japanese imports were becoming more credible. Detroit was rushing out smaller models, and shoppers were learning to compare efficiency, reliability, and price with less patience than before. The Pacer still had personality, but personality was no longer enough. By the late 1970s, the car that had once pulled people into showrooms was becoming a warning sign. Different had made the Pacer famous. Difficult made buyers walk past it. The numbers turned the Pacer from a bold experiment into a financial problem AMC could not hide. In its launch year, the car had real heat. People came to see it because nothing else in the showroom looked remotely similar. Early sales were strong enough to make the gamble seem justified. Then the curiosity faded. By the end of the decade, annual Pacer sales had fallen hard, and AMC was left trying to recover the cost of a car that had required major tooling, unusual body engineering, and a factory commitment built around volume that never lasted. That is the part that made the Pacer different from a normal flop. General Motors could miss with an oddball model and spread the damage across trucks, full-size cars, luxury brands, and overseas operations. AMC did not have that cushion. Every dollar tied up in the Pacer was a dollar not going into fresher compacts, better engines, or the next product cycle. For a small independent automaker, weird was not just a styling choice. It was a balance sheet risk. The car also picked up a reputation problem. Some owners reported rust, water leaks, and electrical issues, and those complaints mattered. because the Pacer already had to persuade buyers to accept its unusual shape. Quality concerns were not the only reason sales declined, but they made the car harder to defend when shoppers had more conventional alternatives sitting across town. Then came the cultural shift AMC could not control. The Pacer stopped being described as the car of tomorrow and started becoming a visual joke. Its glassy, rounded body made it perfect for comedy, novelty, and later nostalgia. It showed up as the strange little time capsule of the 1970s, a car people remembered instantly even if they did not want to buy one. In pop culture, that made it valuable. In a dealership, it was deadly. By 1980, production ended. AMC had not merely built a strange car that failed to keep selling, it had spent scarce capital proving that attention and demand are not the same thing. So was the Pacer really the mistake? The uncomfortable answer is that the idea was better than the result. A compact car with a wide cabin, huge visibility, short overall length, and a shape nobody could confuse for anything else was not nonsense. Decades later, buyers would reward cars that felt roomy inside, easy to see out of, and visually distinct. The failure came from the translation. The Pacer became heavier than planned, lost the compact rotary engine it was designed around, and ended up with conventional drivetrains that hurt the space and economy argument. Its best qualities were real, but they were buried under compromises buyers could feel every day. AMC's deeper error may have been dependence. It built a car the market had to learn how to understand, then needed that market to respond quickly and in large numbers. That is the trap. AMC had to be different to survive. But when different missed, there was nowhere left to hide. The Pacer was not just a punchline. It was AMC betting scarce money on a car that tried to outthink Detroit with space, visibility, and identity. Maybe America was wrong to walk away. Maybe AMC was wrong to make the future look so strange. Thanks for watching. In the comments, tell me, was the Pacer misunderstood or doomed from the start?